Alrighty, whew, a little bit of a headache. So, what time is it? A little late getting started. Not too bad. Too bad. Better than some nights. Been a little stressed over the last couple of days, waiting for a paycheck to come in, and bank accounts are looking a little slim after my recent trip. So that's sort of stressful right now. I keep wanting to go check my bank account like every 15 minutes. It's not going to change. Like if it wasn't changed by 7 p.m. tonight, then it's not going to change by 9 p.m. tonight. It's not going to change by 11 p.m. tonight. It's just, I'll have to wait till tomorrow, and if not tomorrow, the next day. But if it's not here by the 3rd, I'm up a creek. And so there's a little bit of that panic that sets in my brain going, oh God, what happened? What happened to my money? The money I need to survive. I've got like $100 left in my bank account. I was like, that'll feed me maybe for a couple weeks. Yeah, so I'm a little anxious about that. That's definitely heavy on my mind. And I'm still waiting on the laptop. It's like if that doesn't show up or that shows up damaged, it's just like, come on, please. Like, I have to get some things done and are repaired to my car, and I need that paycheck like bad. Like, I didn't think I got that close to the bone for my trip to Hawaii. I need to go back and look through my accounts, because before I went to Hawaii, I had about twice as much as the trip to Hawaii should have cost. And I did a really good job of getting a good price on the trip to Hawaii. But how did I get to the point where I'm so under the barrel right now? I have to go back and look through. Well, I did spend $380 on the laptop, so that ate some of it. That's about, yeah, there's that. So where's the other, like, I feel like I'm missing a few hundred, and I really need to go back and check that out. It's not encouraging. It's not an enthusiastic moment for me. But, and I've also, I think I just got a cold or something. Not like a cold, but just, I think what I went through with my health on the trip to Hawaii, and like the week after, like the recovery week after that, and then I think it messed with my digestive system, which is already very, very, very sensitive. So I feel like all of those combined have just chewed up my energy reserves. So I'm not doing as well as I could be. But I intend to write myself a piece of, that's beautiful, thanks. I intend to be working on a piece of fiction today. I did some world building. I did some character design. I'm not sure. Like, I feel like I'm torn. Like, the story wants the main character to turn out to be a jerk, and sort of the story be like the character gets his just desserts at the end, but in doing so damns the rest of us. But at the same time, I feel like that's a very dissatisfying story. And I feel like the other approach for that character is panicked desperation and ignorance to the consequences of what they're doing, only to sort of realize it at the end and make a sacrifice to try to appease it, but have the sacrifice not work out, not save anybody, doesn't make a benefit or a difference in any way. I feel like, I don't know, like, that's a pretty harsh story. And I think it's hard to get into. Like, I could potentially write this story as a person struggling against all odds to do what they need to do, and you can find that sympathetic, only to realize as you get towards the end that, oh, we don't want him to get what we've been hoping he'll achieve by the end of the story, because if he does, he is the greatest monster that has ever touched the face of the earth. The consequences of him getting, like, that's a hard thing to do in a story, to not make it like, oh, you jerk, why would you write that story? Like, I don't know why my brain keeps doing that kind of stuff. But it's sort of like the script to the animation that I wrote is brutal to the viewer. And so I was like, I don't know that I can do that. That's a harsh one. I think my brain is really coming up with some absolutely unkind and harsh storylines. And I don't know that I want to deliver on a story that's like that. So, I'll still develop that story a little bit, and I might write it as a more a shorter, kinder story, I guess. I don't know if I would call it kind. I'm pulling my hair a little tight there. Ouch. But so that's, as I've been playing with that story, the more I'm thinking about it, like, my tendency is to write more than one story at once, so that when one starts to go slow, I can switch over to another one and keep a good steady pace. I think that's a little bit harder to do for these. But as I'm sitting here, I'm contemplating, there is another story idea I had a while back, years ago, I think, that might be kind of fun to do. It's still a dystopian, harsh story, but I kind of want to play it in that world. And maybe that's just because where I am right now, like, with my health messing with me a little bit. The main character of that story it's a science fiction. The main character of that story is somebody who has a health problem that he sees a potential treatment for that and goes for it. But it's a new cutting edge technology that we haven't culturally, as Western culture goes, we haven't sort of reached a point where we've decided if that's something we're okay with. And so he has to make some special choices, special maneuvers to make this all happen. And by doing that, like, by seeking out a course of treatment that should make his life better and give him the chance to achieve something with his life rather than struggle with illness, he has to sort of become an outcast in the broader cultural view in order to achieve that. And that's sort of like finding other people with that same scenario that they're dealing with. Like, they're all struggling with health or physical limitations that make it so that they could live their lives as a struggle and impair their ability to achieve positive things for their culture and their families and their friends. Like, applying yourself to a cause that's greater than yourself is something that's oftentimes a goal, a very rewarding goal for a lot of people. And if you have a condition or you struggle with health problems in your life where you're restricted from being able to achieve those things, it can feel like an injustice. And even more so if there's a potential treatment, but you're not allowed access to it. And so to be able to get away from that restriction and go get that potential treatment, but in doing so, be cast out from the rest of your society. I mean, it's a trade-off. But the potential of having a rich and healthy life where you could benefit a greater part of humanity, is it worth that sacrifice? And that story, I feel like that story, I mean, partially right, some of it's right now after being sick or having news on and off for a few weeks now. It percolates back into my brain again. And I feel like that could be a really great story. It may also be a really big story, a very long story. But I think I want to maybe focus on that one. Because the sort of theme of it, the character design, the world building, all of that is sort of fascinating and touches on my muses right now. So I think that's where I'm going to end up going. I may still play around with the other story, the one with the character who's potentially damning us all through either ignorance or not caring, or his own cruelty or self-importance. I don't know how else to phrase that. Oh man, I don't know where that's coming from. I'm just chronically tired all the time now. But so I think tomorrow, hopefully I'll get the laptop, and I need to do a lot of editing. Like I didn't get as much done today as because I was exhausted and I didn't feel well, and I ate all day, and it was such a chore to try to sit up today that I started to fall behind, which sucks because that's not where I wanted to be right now. But I got to give myself permission to survive that, work my way through it. That's part of the consequences of dealing with health concerns. But adjusting my schedule, adjusting my plan, I can still achieve a fair amount if I really put myself to it this month. So hopefully with the laptop and the bank accounts working out in the next day or two, I will really start to head in on that. I hope to get the book review and movie review finished tomorrow. I've got a couple appointments that I got to make in the afternoon, but I should be able to get some work on that done tomorrow morning. And the new fitness routine too. But I'm going to put in the time to do some writing. I want to do about 2 to 3 hours of writing each night is my hope. And with that kind of time frame, I think it's like I do roughly about 1,000 an hour, but I can do about 1,500 in 2 hours maybe with my current schedule the way it is. And that's usually the safer margin to work on. So 1,500 sounds like a song. 3,500 miles away. Counting Crows. I think it's a Counting Crows song. There you go. Times 25 days. So imagine that I'm going to lose a few days, either to health or emergencies or things that need to be taken care of. So I can get about 37,500 words by the end of the month if I do 25 days of about 1,500 words a day. So I could get a 30,000 word novel or novella going, and a 7,500 short story. That's about a decent short story. I was actually I encountered an interview with Neil Gaiman earlier when I was doing some wandering around, and he was talking about how when he was younger, when everybody wrote on typewriters, a short story was about 3,000 words. He did an anthology of short stories, and each of the short stories submissions tended to be about 3,000 words long. And then a few years later, when computers were available for more people to use, he did another short story anthology, and so many of the short stories in that anthology were, I think he said 7,000 to 9,000 words. And he noticed that in a lot of those stories, there wasn't more story in that number of words. You've tripled, in many cases, the word count, but the stories were the same size. And by that, it sounded like he was referring to the fact that there's a lot of filler. They're inflated stories where, like, writing a tight story where there aren't extra wording to pad and fluff out a story is an inherent fact of the time when they were using, and his theory was the time when they were using typewriters, you drafted a story in your mind or with pen and paper because you could scribble out an idea, scratch it out, start a new section, rewrite sections of it. You don't do that with a typewriter. A typewriter is it's work to write with. I have an old typewriter actually, and I did some stuff for some of the web comics I did with it. But it's not a adjustable, free-flowing thought process of writing with a typewriter. So you come up with your idea in another way, writing on paper or whatever. But if you go to type it on the typewriter, you only type the important stuff, the stuff you need to get down. And I'm like, I can kind of see that. Like writing with a computer, you have the ability to move sentences around and move and play with that. But I feel like to a certain degree, what he was talking about as being extra, the inflation of a story, the fluff, the air in between, I feel like some of that is down to style and pacing. And there's just a different sense of pacing that some of the stories that come out now need to be. It's not delivering the concept to you concisely. It's delivering a stream of consciousness of the characters or the environment or the society that you're writing about. And so there's pacing aspects where there will be quiet nights alone where you're just sitting there and your thoughts meander as a character, and that meandering thought is important as a rest period between moments of tension that I feel like there is something to it being maybe valuable. But I don't know. I'm not Neil Gaiman. I am not a professional author yet. And I don't know that I have the chops or the skill as a writer to necessarily know what I'm talking about enough to disagree with him. So I will defer to the experts at this point. But I feel like the short story that I could write, I mean, I have 2 potential short stories that I can write, and 1 full-length novel that I don't think is going to stop at 30,000 words. I might get 30,000 words done in this month, but I feel like that one's going to run long. But if I handle it right, I may only have to redraft it once. So if I did 30,000 words in the month of April and maybe another 15 to 20,000, I don't know. This one could run 120,000 words by the time I'm done. Let's see what I can do this month. I may aim for doing 2 or 3 hours a night and go for about 2,000 to 3,000 words a day writing. And if I can achieve that by the end of the month, I may be able to pull off 50,000 words in the first month of writing, and then see if it goes to 80 to 100,000 by the second month. But if I'm going to do it that way, I may see if I can pull off a short story or 2, just so I can have something that I can share at the end of the month or the end of 2 months. Because I want to be able to have something that's ready and shared before the end of the year. And a 120,000 word novel drafted 2 or 3 times and edited, that's not going to be ready until November. That's going to take time. That's going to take a lot of time. I'll think about that. But I think that's a story I'm going to start plowing into. I'm going to play around with both of the short story ideas that I have. And honestly, one's definitely a short story. The other one is potentially a novella in its own right. And then there's the big novel. So I've got my writing ideas out in front of me here. And I think it's entirely possible that I may end up doing that trio of stories. I want to finish the short story by the end of the month. Maybe the novella by the end of 2 months, or at least most of the way into it, and get at least a third of the way into the novel. And if I do that in 2 months, the subsequent 2 months, I will be working on another fiction story 2 months from now. And if I do that, maybe I'll just alternate them. Because that's really the way I write. I've occasionally sat down and worked on one all the way through for a period of time, but it's not my preferred way to do it. And I don't think I get really good drafts when I do it that way. Because I need to work with the pacing and the flow of the story, and the character has to tell me how they're going to evolve through the story. And the world has to set up practical obstacles in the path. It can't feel like these are weirdly arranged things that you throw at your character just to throw them at your character. They don't naturally follow the consequences of events in the world. And just as easily, it's a danger of developing the solution to that problem too easily. So it feels like, oh, that wasn't a real problem. It was just something you put in there to narrate a certain point. And it's solved magically. It's the Deus Machina. It's the by the hand of God. I don't like a story that has that kind of element in it. So to give this story room to breathe enough to tell me how it needs to flow, and that's sort of the way I am as a writer. I am very often, I will build the world and I will build the characters. But I then set the characters into the world and let the two work with each other to grow and live and tell their story to me. And it's a weird thing to describe to anybody who's not been a writer. Because like, it's not a real person. This is a fictional entity. It's not a real world in most cases. They're constructs of my brain. But there is some aspect of myself somewhere that I can't tell how to make the story happen. It tells me how the story should happen. And it's not like a second personality. It's not like a schizophrenic, a dissociative issue. But I do think there's an aspect of it being like my subconscious and those sort of unspoken rules of culture that we all sort of know. Like we know certain things about our society and the people we spend time with and how the world works. We know it without knowing it. Like you can't sit there and explain to somebody else what those rules are. You just know that that's how the world works. When you're doing a certain thing, you expect that the world is going to behave this way without consciously thinking it has to be this way. And there is an aspect of that unconscious set of rules and an understanding and a subconscious mindset that informs the path and decisions being made. It's such a weird thing. Like being a writer sometimes is a really weird thing to try to explain to somebody. Kind of enjoying having this conversation with myself tonight. Because whereas before I was sort of dragging and struggling, and my hands are still humming, because when I get sick, my blood pressure drops pretty substantially. Yeah, the physiological stress is making me physically uncomfortable and too tired to do a lot. But talking about the potentials of these stories really has me excited to play with them. So it's gotten my excitement going again. I'm going to spend some time working on some stuff tonight. It's coming up on 10:15. We're almost at a half an hour. I think I'm probably going to call it here tonight and get to work so that I have something to share tomorrow and discuss. All right, I will see you tomorrow. Take care of yourselves.